بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الهزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله ta'ala wa barakatuh. And for those who gave the salam before me, wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. Is the voice clear? Inshallah. No one is saying it's not, so I'm assuming the voice is clear. Alhamdulillah. So I praise Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. I ask Allah to raise the rank and the honor and the status of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his pure family, his noble companions, and all those who follow them in righteousness until the day of judgment. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ni'mah of al-Islam, for the endowment of al-Islam. We praise Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for the ni'mah of Iman, for the endowment of sound faith in Him tabaraka wa ta'ala. And we praise Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for the ni'mah of following Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we praise Allah for the ni'mah of being upon the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah among the Asha'ira wal Maturidiyya in Aqidah, and among the Hanafiyya and the Malikiyya and the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila in al-Fiqh, and upon at-Turuq al-Sufiyya in at-Tasawwuf, which allows us to implement in a systematic way the hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel when he asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam about Islam, which is an indication to al-fiqh, to the science of fiqh, and he asked about al-iman, which is an indication to the science of al-aqidah, and he asked about al-ihsan, which is an indication to the science of at-tasawwuf. And this, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that this was Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion, your deen. So our deen is that which was conveyed with an unbroken chain from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam down to our day. And as I continue of clarifying the topic in my Post-Fajr reflection, of clarifying the confusion, which is the second part, what I've noticed, and it really kind of saddens you, but I understand. It makes you feel kind of a little sad when you see some of us who struggle to try to understand this deen. And it is something that most of us as African American converts who learn this deen for the first time, we face a lot of challenges, you know. So it is understandable when we're confused about a lot of issues, especially when we live in a time where so many things come at you in the name of Islam, and it's very hard to distinguish between them. And everyone is selling their goods. Everyone is selling their goods. So you have this group and that group and this group, that group, this group and that group. And it all can seem quite confusing for someone who doesn't have a foundation to start with. You know, if you look at us in our Western society, you know, there's a progression in learning. You know, all of us went to school. Some of us start in pre-K. Then we go to kindergarten and first grade and second grade and third grade and fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th, 11th, 12th, then to college, then to grad school, and then may even pursue your PhD and further studies. And then, depending what field you go in, you have your internship, and then ultimately you end up with a position, a career, right? And that whole process, you notice, took you at least 20 years to get to where you are able to be proficient in whatever field you're in. I want you to think about that. That's for worldly sciences. That doesn't really involve much, but you go through a process of around 20 years on average of acquiring knowledge to ultimately get to what you do for the rest of your life. There's a process of ta'allum. There's a process of learning. And that is standard in the country, that at least you go up to high school, which is around 13 years of acquiring knowledge to get to that level. And then if we're talking about college, that can be anywhere from 4 to 8 years, even 10, depending what you're doing, right? So you're talking about you're spending 20 something years in acquiring knowledge just to do what you want to do. And that's for some worldly sciences. That doesn't involve much skill for the most of the jobs that we're going to do after high school or after a bachelor's degree in college. The jobs that we're going to have or the fields we're going to be in really don't require a lot of study. But just for those positions, you need, as a qualification, at least that amount of education. And the one who doesn't have at least a high school diploma, unless they're very innovative and they can create their own business, they're going to be shut out of the job market. They're not going to be even considered in a lot of positions. Why am I mentioning this? Because in our normal life, our customary life, we know that seeking knowledge is important and that knowledge has stages. We understand that. It is our life. It is just a matter of what we're learning. But we know in any field of study, there has to be a degree of time, a length of time and stages in learning for you to gain proficiency in anything. In Islam, our deen, it is no different. You can not get all of the Islamic knowledge in one setting. our teachers used to say to us about the science of hadith, and it applies to all of the religion. They said, "Man talab al-hadith jumlatan fatahu jumla." That the person who tries to seek all of the knowledge of hadith in its entirety will miss that knowledge altogether. I repeat, they used to say, whoever seeks the knowledge of al-hadith, right, all in its entirety at one time, will lose that knowledge, will miss that knowledge in its entirety. In other words, knowledge of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is taken in stages. And as a person who has studied with hadith scholars around the world, I've never seen a teacher who we started with from the beginning start us with Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Never. And I've had the opportunity to study with a number of great hadith scholars in our time. And none of them said, okay, you're a new student, here is Sahih al-Bukhari, here is Sahih Muslim, and let's start studying. None of them done that. We always started with a small collection of hadith. Then we learned that, then we built to a bigger collection. Then we moved into major books, right? And you had to learn to have patience at each stage before you get to those major books of hadith. And when you got to those major books of hadith, from all of your previous studies in the smaller books, when you got to the bigger book, you were able to understand very easily, excuse me. You were able to understand easily. And this is with every science. Whether we were learning Aqidah, we started with certain books as summarized, then we moved to larger books, then to larger books. The same thing in al-fiqh, and the same thing in al-tasawwuf, same thing if you're learning Arabic language, everything is this way. Why am I mentioning this? One of the problems that causes us confusion in our religion is that we fail to utilize this well-known process of learning, which is to learn stage by stage by stage. And the other thing is to learn everything within its science. So if I'm talking about the science of Aqidah, I should learn about the science of Aqidah. If I'm talking about al-fiqh, I should learn about al-fiqh. If I'm talking about at-tasawwuf, I should learn at-tasawwuf. I should not mix between the sciences. Why? Because if I'm mixing the sciences, I'm going to be confused in what relates to what. So therefore, I'm going to be talking about things that don't relate to things that I'm talking about. Or I'm adding things that don't relate to things that I'm talking about. So if I'm on one subject, I'm adding issues from another subject to that subject, which has nothing to do with the subject. And that is because I haven't learned in an organized manner. With that, I encourage myself and all of you to start learning how to acquire knowledge. What is the proper methodology to learn? And I gave you some examples previously, but the added thing I want to add is that be patient in learning Islam in stages, right? I hear oftentimes someone would come to me and they would get in a discussion that they don't understand. They understand a little bit, but as this discussion progresses, it's way above their level of understanding. And my answer would be to that is, you're out of your ability. You're way above your stage. If you don't know addition and subtraction, there's no way you can do division. So you shouldn't even be talking about division when you still need to learn addition and subtraction, right? It's just, you're not going to learn. You need some prerequisites in order to understand the topic. So what confuses people when they're talking about al-aqidah, as an example, and they don't understand the prerequisites of that field, so that when they go into it, when people talking about the subject, they are confused. Why? Because they don't have a sound base and foundation, and the prerequisites for the discussion they don't have. So what I want to do is help you build a sound foundation so that you would have something to build on. So yesterday, I talked about the importance of al-aql and al-naql, the intellect and the revelation, or the transmitted text from the Quran and the Sunnah, and that both are important in understanding our deen. Why am I mentioning that? Because if you just rely on your intellect with not being guided by revelation, you will fall into error. So you cannot just use the mind alone, unaided by revelation, right? So that's one aspect. So if you just was a person who just said, I'm smart, I can understand things myself without the aid of revelation, you're going to go into error. Likewise, that's one extreme. On the other extreme, if you rely solely on the transmitted text, al-naql, the Quran and the Sunnah, without any usage of the intellect to distinguish things, you can easily be misguided in error. I want you to understand the point. So you got one extreme over here and another extreme over here. Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah are in the middle of those two extremes by informing us that the priority is an-naql, the transmitted text, which is verified by the sound mind, right? So al-aql is an evidence for the truthfulness of an-naql. So both are used, right? So whenever the scholars of Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, when they explain the issues of belief, they have two evidences, two sources of a dalil. One being as a priority, a dalil, excuse me, a dalil an-naqli, that's one. And the second is a dalil al-aqli, right? Ad-dalil al-naqli is the textual proof. So when you say, give me your dalil, you have a dalil from al-naql, which is the Quran, meaning a verse from the Quran, or a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is a transmitted evidence, a transmitted proof, ad-dalil al-naqli. So they would give you a dalil al-naqli, that is the priority, and they would follow that with a dalil al-aqli, the intellectual proof or the rational proof, right? So the evidence from the Quran and Sunnah is an evidence, but there is also that supports it, that stands as an evidence for its validity, ad-dalil al-aqli, right? And this is how the scholars of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah explain. If I take you two main groups, the Imam al-Tahawi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, because we talked about al-Tahawiyah, he mentioned two groups at the end of his creed that erred in this situation, in this topic. One group he mentioned was al-Mu'tazila. Al-Mu'tazila had the methodology of relying solely on al-aql as to determine right from wrong. Al-aql, the intellect. With no really reliance primarily on a naql. So there was a rational movement, what their minds deemed to be true, despite revelations. So revelation was judged not on the merit of revelation, on the merit of the intellect over revelation, which was a problem. And the other group, al-mushabbiha, those who liken Allah to his creation. And these were both during the time of Imam al-Tahawi and before. So there were two groups. I'll write them. And inshallah, my intention is to have, I'm sorry, I'm writing, is to have charts, but my time is just Allahu. It's very, doing this every day and then arranging times is very difficult for me. Make dua that Allah gives me more blessing in my time. But I wanted to have charts for you so that it makes it easy, you can follow. But in the meanwhile, inshallah, you just got to follow me. So Al-Mu'tazila were a group that was in the time of the first three generations. They were a deviant group. They had heavy reliance on al-aql, the intellect, over an-naql, over the transmitted text. So that led them astray. And Imam al-Tahawi mentioned them as a group that is away from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and that they are misguided. And then the other group he mentioned, which was on the other extreme, is al-mushabbiha. Al-mushabbiha, those who liken Allah to the creation, and this was during the time of the Salaf, right? And their problem, how they got to liken Allah to the creation, how they fell in that tashbih, was that they relied on a naql without ever taking in consideration the evidence of al-aql, right, of the intellect. In other words, they read verses and they didn't use their minds. They just applied things to verses that the sound mind would reject. And as I mentioned, according to Ahl Sunnah, the sound mind is an evidence for the validity of the sacred law. And there is a rule in the science of hadith that one of the signs that a hadith is not relied upon is that it contradicts the sound mind. That's one of the rules in the science of hadith, which later on in your studies, you're going to come across this, right? As you advance in your studies, when you study the major books of the science of hadith, you're going to come across this issue when they're talking about how to grade, what are the conditions for verifying the authenticity of a hadith. One of the conditions is that the hadith doesn't contradict the sound mind, right? So the sound mind, al-aql, as-salim, has a place in the religion. So here is the deviance. I'm going to show you when you don't use your mind, the aql, and you just use revelation, how you go astray. So when we speak about modern mushabbiha in our day, and really help me, I want, for the purpose of you learning, I really want to leave off names. I only use the name so you don't get confused. So when I say Wahhabiyya, I don't say that to insult nobody. That's not the purpose. And I'll show you where the early founders of the group of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, they called themselves Wahhabiyya. I didn't make that name up. That's what they used to call themselves. When that name became synonymous with their bad deeds and movements and belief, they later changed it to Salafiyya. We didn't do that. That was them. That's what they called themselves, right? It's not like, so now today, these modern day revisionists of their creed try to act like someone's calling you a bad name. You called yourself that. No one called you Wahhabiyya. You made the name Wahhabiyya. That's what you were known as. That's what you called your da'wah. That's from your books. So that's not a name we made up. Because you change your name, you say, don't call me by my old name. You called yourself that. And it's just the name Wahhabiyya became synonymous with evil actions and bad beliefs, right? And innovation. And maybe that's why you don't want to be called that, but that's what you called yourself. That's what you called your da'wah. That's what you spread around the world. And that's what the Muslims remember you as, right? So, and I'm going to share with you this book is around 16 volumes. It is written all about the scholars, the main scholars of the Wahhabiyya, and what they said, even the writings and letters of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab to the people in Hijaz in that time when they were first beginning to spread their da'wah. This book is full of those statements. So I'm going to, in future classes, read to you some of what they said from their own writings, not what Imam Amin says, what they wrote. This is their books, their early scholars, right? All of their stuff, what they said about the Muslims, how they spread their da'wah with that name, and they mentioned it explicitly, our da'wah, our way of doing things. All right, that's a sidetrack. So when I talked about al-mushabbiha, and those are early groups because these ideas are not new. Yes, the Wahhabiyya, under the leadership of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, had some things that never existed before, right? But those ideas, they borrowed them from early movements. So if you understood the early movements, you can understand the idea and won't get trapped in your modern context and get angry and not listen, right? So al-mushabbiha, their concept was a complete reliance on the transmitted text, which we said is an-naql, without using al-aql in between that. Now, let me give you an example of that. I'm going to be very ugly in my explanation. When I say ugly, it is ugly to believe these things, but this is what happens when one relies on an-naql, literally, without never taking in consideration the sound mind, right? What will happen? And this is what happened to al-mushabbiha. So they would read in the Quran a verse, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa, literally. And they say, literally, this means that they say, and this is quoting something that is wrong, and quoting is not unlawful, right? For explaining. If you believe these things, this is problematic. So that's why I said they said. So whenever you quote something, this is a lesson, whenever you quote something that is wrong, it can lead to disbelief. It is disbelief, then you should use the expression of quoting. Not I'm saying something that is disbelief, or it is unlawful to say, I'm quoting what someone else said. So they say, just a rule for you, start practicing it. Don't say Allah says in the Quran that he has hands. Say, they said Allah mentioned hands, and then explain the truth. Don't speak of things from yourself. It saves you from falling into disbelief. So they read in the Quran, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. They read, and they say, the most merciful rose above the throne. That's one of their translations. Or they say, the most merciful established himself on the throne. That's another one of their translations. Or they say, wal-iyadu billah, which is worse than all of them, the most merciful sat on the throne. Right? All of them are wrong translations, but nevertheless, this is what you'll find in your English translations of the Quran. And then they will tell you, I'm just giving you, when you use your mind, how foolish this stuff is. But they don't use their minds, so they'll say foolish things. Then they'll quote a hadith of the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which is the hadith of the slave girl. And they say that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam came to the slave girl and asked the slave girl, where is Allah? And the slave girl, according to them, they said the slave girl said, above the heavens. Fis sama. So they translate above the heaven, because they try to make their belief. Okay. So they say that is a place from Allah. Now, what they do is, from these narrations, and I'm quite sure all of you have heard, someone come to you and test your faith. Where's Allah? Wal-iyadu billah. Which has never relayed from the Sahaba that they walked around, or the Tabi'een, or the Atba' Tabi'een, walking around asking people, where's Allah? So that's a whole nother innovation, but nevertheless, that's how they understood the Sunnah, right? And so they say Allah is above the heaven. Then they get another hadith, and they'll say, literally, they say, and he only comes down on the last third of the night, or on the day of Arafah. And they'll quote some narrations. So on the last third of the night, Allah leaves Al-Arsh and comes down to the lowest heaven. Subhanallah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I'm sorry. But this stuff is foolish. But nevertheless, this is what they say. Okay. But all this is literal. Listen, you must understand these things literal. Then they'll read another narration and they'll say, on the day of judgment, Allah is going to put his foot over the hellfire, right? Okay. That's literal. You must believe that literally. Okay. So he's above the throne. That's his location. He moves to the lowest heaven in the last third of the night, right? Every last third of the night, he comes from above the throne to the lowest of the heaven. This is their saying. And I'm saying this is their saying because anyone with a sound mind know this stuff is insane. But nevertheless, this is what they say. It's literal. You must believe it literally, right? This is literal. You can't interpret it. You got to literally believe this. Okay, let's take it. So he moves every night, the last third of the night, to the lowest heaven. On the day of judgment, he's above the heaven, and he's going to put his foot over the hellfire. Tell you. I want to show you other hadith. All this is literal, according to them. According to them. Okay. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that you have above the earth, the heavens above the earth, Sama'ad Dunya. Then you have as-samawat, right? And there's 7 levels of the heavens, right? And then above those 7 heavens, you have paradise, which has levels. And the ceiling of paradise is the throne. And according to them, Allah is above the throne. This is all literal. So that means there's direction between the throne and the heavens above the earth. And there is a distance between them and space. So there is heavens, 7, right? And al-Jannah and as-samawat are not the same. Heavens are levels, and then above the heavens is paradise, which is levels, darajat, stages, ranks, right? And above that, the ceiling of paradise is the throne. And according to them, Allah is above the throne. So this is a direction, if it's all literal, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if we take it all this literally, I just want you to follow how I was telling you, when you don't use both, you're going to go astray. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the heavens and the earth compared to al-kursi, which they call the footstool, is where they say Allah put his foot. That's another literal thing, according to them, right? The heavens and earth compared to the kursi is like a ring thrown in the desert, a small ring thrown in the desert. And the kursi compared to al-arsh is like a ring thrown in the desert. So the kursi, the heavens and the earth put together are so small in compared to al-kursi. And the kursi is so small in compared to al-arsh. And according to them, Allah is above the arsh. In other words, and he only comes from the arsh during the last third of the night to the lowest of the heavens. So through paradise, past kursi, down to the shrink to get into the paradise, down to the paradise, shrink to get into the heavens, till he comes above the heavens of the earth. You said it's literal. You said it's literal. And literally, the heavens and the earth is much smaller than the arsh. That's what the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So literally, we have in their mind if it's all literal, a moving body that shrinks and then expands. Wal-iyadhu billah. And not only that, the Prophet told us about the heavens, there is not a space of 4 fingers, except that there is an angel in there bowing or prostrating or standing. So the heavens are filled up with angels. And according to them, their God shrinks and squeezes between the angels to go to the lowest heaven. And then he put his foot on the day of judgment, because he's above the throne, all the way down through the heavens, through paradise, through the heavens, down to the earth, through the 7 earths, over top of the hellfire, and puts his foot there while he's up in the throne. That you said literal. I'm just literal. You must believe it literally. This is what you said. And all that, let's give them what they say. We don't know how. Okay, we don't have to know the how, but if it's literal, literal is physical. This is physical. If you take it literally, and that's how people take it. So when someone ends up saying that God, Allah, has a shape of a man, you understand where they get it from. You see that ugly belief? And none of them will say that, because none of them, when they think, that doesn't make any sense to attribute to the one we worship. Even a child with the wildest imagination won't accept that. When it's explained what you're really saying, right? When it's really explained what you're saying, you cannot say that. So then, if it's not literal, then you're making some interpretation. But you say, I don't accept interpretation. If it's literal, and the literal result of what you're saying is a body that sits above the throne, that moves throughout the day and night, and actually comes into pieces, shrinks, and has parts. Wait a minute, I'm not finished. I'm just showing you what, if we took your literal interpretation, what's the result? Now, they say that you must literally say Allah has these attributes, and they literally mean that, and you just don't know how they are. So you have a God that has hands, that has feet, that has eyes, right? And has a face that on the day of judgment, because Allah said, Kullu shay'in halikun illa wajha. Everything's going to perish except, according to them, his face. That means what's going to happen to his hands and his feet and his shin. Wal-iyadhu billah. I mean, this is your doctrine. You said it's literal. So everything's going to perish except his face. If I take it literally, it's his face. Everything else is going to go away. Oh, don't take that literally. Oh, so you don't take it literally, right? So, and he doesn't have anything else. So he got everything except a beard and private parts. Wal-iyadhu billah. And some of those mushabbihah actually said that. And I'm going to show you this stuff. Right? So, that's all literal. But you don't know how. Every kid who dreams has weird dreams, and they can't explain the crazy images they have in their mind about things they dream about. So they can have parts and things like that. This is the belief. If it's not literal, then all what you're saying is wasted. If you're saying any of this is not literal, but we don't explain how. I didn't say how. I didn't say how. I just told you what the belief leads to. How that happens, just like you say, is no, I don't know how. Even without knowing how, that don't make no sense. Right? When Allah said about himself, "Laysa kamithlihi shay'un," I'm just giving you the result of how the common person who listens to such a claim honestly and sincerely what they will imagine in their mind about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal iyadhu billah. That's the problem of literalism. And then they write books where they take all these hadith whom the Prophet ﷺ never put together, the companions never put together, the followers never put together, the followers of the followers never put together, right? And then they'll make books that tell you the face, the feet, the hands, the eyes. The Sahaba didn't do that, right? The Tabi'een didn't do that. The Atba'a Tabi'een didn't do that. The Salaf didn't do that. Why are you doing it? If you don't do bid'ah, that's a whole nother story, right? But that's the end result of, what is my point? Follow the point. That's when you take transmitted text without using your intellect, you will take it totally out of context. So Ahl Sunnah says there is the naql, there is the transmitted text, but the sound mind verifies the truthfulness of these things. And what does Allah tell us in relation to all those? لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. And the Mu'tazila were on the other side of the extreme because they rationally thought, if you're going to believe that about God, we're going to deny all of those attributes, right? So that's the Mu'tazila. They didn't accept anything that, everything that is totally doesn't have a meaning. Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah said, we accept the text as they came, but according to the sound mind and revelation, nothing resembles Allah. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different from that. And we recite those verses and those ahadith, and we make a full stop. That's it. We don't use other terms. So when we talk about the belief of Allah, we don't use terms like literally, in reality. We don't add that to the verse. Allah didn't say in the Quran, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa haqiqatan ala dhahirihi bidhatihi. Allah didn't say that. Allah said, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. Full stop. He didn't add all those other things you add. He didn't. So that's what Allah said. You adding things. And you're adding things that contradict لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Nothing absolutely resembles Allah, and He is attributed with hearing and sight. Now, I know the person who follows this idea, this methodology of reading the hadith and the Quran and making them literal, it says, we don't say all that. I didn't say you said that. I didn't say that. I never said that the Wahhabiyya said what I just described. I didn't say that. I said what you described, if we take it as you said it, it necessitates that, whether you say it or not. Do you understand the difference? I didn't say you said that. I didn't say the Wahhabi said that they believe in a God that sits on the throne, that comes up and down, that has long legs, that descends from the top of the throne to the bottom. I didn't say you said that. I said what you're saying, that all these things must be taken literal, necessitate that. Even if you don't know how it occurs, what you're saying, if it's literal, it necessitates these things. If it doesn't, if it's not literal, then it doesn't necessitate thing. And what you're saying is a contradiction. It cannot be literal and not literal. It doesn't make sense. The sound mind And anyone who uses their mind, remember, they're not using their mind. They're just quoting verses in hadith with the absence of the intellect. They're just saying a knuckle. It says this. It says this. And this is literal. Allah never said literal. The Prophet never said literal. The companions never said literal. The followers of the companions never said literal. And the followers of the followers never said literal. Where did you get that from? Where did you get it from? None of them said literal. None of them. You won't find an authentic report. Let me stop. Tell you. Let me stop. Let me pause. I don't know of any authentic report, and I read. Anyone who knows me know I read a lot. I have mostly all the books of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah from our scholars that you can name. I have them. And I'm saying to myself, of all the major books of our scholars of Sunnah and Jama'ah, I've never saw a statement from the Sahaba or from the Tabi'een or from the followers of the Tabi'een that say, you must believe these things literally. I never saw that. Now, if I'm missing it, show me. I'm a human being. I could be mistaken. Show me where they said that. Not someone after them, not Ibn Taymiyyah, not someone who in their time was considered a deviant anyway. I'm talking about the major companions of the Sahaba who transmitted this religion, the great scholars of the Sahaba, the great scholars of the Tabi'een who said you must believe these things literally, and they use that word. I don't find. And you can relate that with a chain of transmission. I don't find it. And just point to the books. We don't got to argue between us. In this book, this is where the Sahaba, one of the companions of the Prophet, with an unbroken chain to the narrator, said that Allah's attributes or any of these things, and they use the term literally. Show me. Show me. Because that's your claim. If we don't take it literally, then we are deviant. But the Sahaba never said that. Definitely the Prophet never said that. Definitely the companions, the followers, and you say you're following the Salaf. Tell me. Show me where that's at. All right. And inshallah, this is something, and I'm going to show you where the scholars said the opposite of that. The great scholars said the opposite of the apparent meaning is not the meaning. I'm going to show you that in their books, right? This is process, right? So we're going to have to distinguish it. We got conflicting statements. We're going to have to figure out what is right and what is wrong. We can't just say, okay, this is the belief in God. And this is what I say to you. And I'm going to make this definitive statement. If we're going to call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, other than the Christians, the Jews, the atheists, how are you going to call to something you don't even understand yourself? That's how serious this issue is. You're telling the Christians that their belief is bad and they're mistaken, and the Jews and everyone else, and Islam is the truth, and you as a so-called Muslim don't even know what to believe about your God, about the one you worship. Think about how silly that is. You're confused. You don't even know if your God is in heaven or exists without a place. You don't even know if your God is attributed with organs and limbs or he doesn't. You don't even know if your God moves or rests. You don't know that, but you're going to tell somebody else their belief is invalid. How stupid is that? I mean, seriously, use our minds. That's why I gave you this lesson about a knuckle and the akal, right? You're going to call to somebody to something you don't even understand yourself. You're not sure. Maybe God is in heaven. Maybe he's not. It's all just wording, huh? But you're going to tell the Christian that they're misguided. And you don't even know what to believe yourself. Do you understand how silly that is? So what I'm trying to do is help you understand first, unravel your confusion. Now, once your confusion is unraveled, you learn the correct belief. Because the reason why people don't learn the correct belief, because they're still confused. So you got to unravel the confusion first. I got to show you that you don't make any sense in your belief about what you claim to be al-haq. If you saying Islam is the truth and everything other than it is falsehood, then I accept. But if you don't know what to believe in Allah, the very and most important thing that the Prophet came to call the people to, and you confused about that, then what are you calling to? You calling to a religion you don't understand yourself? You're calling, forget the religion. You're calling to a God, to a Lord that we should worship that you don't understand yourself? So I say definitively, as Ahl Sunnah said definitively, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a location. Allah is not attributed with directions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not attributed with limbs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not move. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laysa kamithlihi shay. Absolutely nothing resembles Allah. I say it definitively, no doubt. Whoever believes that Allah is in a place, that Allah moves, that Allah has limbs and organs, that he descends and ascends, and they mean that and they understand that, they are misguided about the Lord who is worshipped. No doubt about it. Even if they misunderstand the transmitted text. I know where you got your confusion from. I just explained it to you. That's why I laid down that foundation of understanding the difference between al-aql and al-naql. I know where you got your confusion. I know you're reading the Quran, but you're reading the Quran without using your mind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many verses told you to use your mind. Allah spoke to the people of sound intellects, not foolish people. Allah multiple times in the Quran speak to people to use their mind. It's a part of understanding revelation. If you leave your mind out, you're going to go crazy. You're going to come up with the most strange things that never has been heard. But now listen, I don't want you to go ahead of me. I'm laying a foundation. Because if I start giving you proofs from text without laying the foundation to get you to think, you're going to misunderstand. You're going to go listen to the guy who tells you that Allah has hands. And you must believe that, literally. And Allah has feet, and Allah has eyes, and a face, and a shin. But you can't say, he has thighs. Don't say that. The text don't say that. But he got a shin, no thighs. He don't have a neck. He just got a face and eyes. And it ain't a text that say ears. A'udhu billah. This stuff is kufr. Seriously. And when they listen to it, it sounds ridiculous. But we ain't saying that. I know what you're saying leads to that. And that's how ridiculous it is. It sounds ridiculous to you too, don't it? But what I'm saying to you is once you understand, I'm giving you the beginning, the end. And then now, as we slowly go through it, since you already, every one of us, categorically reject such an idea. All of us. No one, even them, would reject it. So then, therefore, since what you're saying, all of us with a sound mind reject it, that means you got to rethink what you're trying to tell people. Here's the point. So then Your whole literal claim is thrown out the window. Absolutely. The whole claim of your literal approach to Allah's attributes is thrown out the window. Doesn't make sense. So now you got to redefine the word literal. You got to redefine the word literal. What does literal mean to you? Because everyone who speaks language, literal has a meaning. Literal has a literal meaning. If I told you I'm literally going to kick your butt, right? Do you understand for that I'm going to give you a hug? No, you don't. No one does. No one understands that. I didn't mean that literally. That means what I really would understand when you say that, what comes to my mind immediately, that's the literal meaning. That's what literal means in language. The first apparent thing that comes to your mind when you hear a statement is the literal meaning. And literal is synonymous with physical. Do you understand that? When literal is synonymous with a physical meaning. That's what we understand in language, literal. So here's my question. Either it's literal or it's not literal. Or you have a new definition of literal. And anyone who needs to study literal, don't understand, go to your dictionary, open up the word literal, and see the meaning. Literal has an is automatically synonymous with the physical reality that we know of. That's literal. That's what literal entails. In Arabic or English, I don't care what language you use. Literal is literal. If you say zahir, apparent, literal, and when they use the word hakikatan, that means a physical reality. It relates to physical phenomena. That's a literal meaning. You cannot have another interpretation. Literal is not metaphysical. Literal is not allegorical. Literal is none of that. Literal is the physical reality that we observe with the senses. That's literal. So it doesn't mean literal. Okay. So it's not literal. And this is just to give you, I'm speaking in a way to just wake your intellects up. Because when we go into details about all these things, it's extremely important. And as I'm doing this, unraveling, because here's what I realize about us. Because we like microwave Islam, and this type of learning takes time, right? We like the quick fix, which is always empty, doesn't take in the detail, doesn't look at just boom, right? I'm telling you, that's why I said be patient and stop the microwave Islam stuff, right? And the basis of everything I'm saying, so I said, where's your proof? Allah says in Surah 42, verse 11, Laysa kamithlihi shay, wa huwa as-sami'ul basir. Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Ikhlas, which we all know, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Nothing is similar or equal to Allah. Allah does not resemble his creation, right? That's the basis from text. The intellect will show you when you apply literal meanings to the attributes of Allah, how you go astray. Ahl Sunnah, they said, مَهْمَا تَصَوَّرْتَ بِبَالِكَ فَاللَّهُ بِخِلَافِ ذَلِكَ. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is different from what you imagine. And what those people are calling to is an imaginary body that is floating in space above the throne and a mess, but and if this understanding is not the conclusion of your belief, I need you to redefine several things. Number one, if things are not literal, then what is the new definition of literal? Because what we know as literal, according to the language, is literal. And remember, I'm not taking away your false understanding of without a how. We don't say how. I'm not taking that away from you because that's a wrong interpretation too, but we ain't going to discuss that. So let's just use your we don't know how. So if you say Allah literally got a hand and his hand is not like our hands, but it's not how, you're still describing the end result, a physical reality, a phenomenon, a physical, because you said it's literal. It's just that we don't understand it. And there are many created things that have a hand that we don't know how their hand is. Because there are many created things that exist that we don't even know about them. And they have hands and limbs, but we never saw them. There are creation that we never saw, that we never, all of us have never seen. Creations, the angels are creation, and they have organs, and they have a form, but we don't know how the form of the angel is. So that's no cancellation prize. Allah has a form, but we don't know how. So do the angels. We don't know the reality of the angel's form. So do many creations that exist that we don't know about, that have form, and we don't know the how of their form. So that's not a cancellation prize. That's not a way to say, okay, see, we cleared Allah from resemblance creation because he got real limbs and real organs, but we don't know how. Oh, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And it's so strange that it's almost laughable. It is laughable. I cannot help myself. Like, do you expect someone to really believe that who got a mind? Come on. All right, let me close out. All I'm doing is making you think. The end result, I gave you the end result of what, let's just take me. What I understand from literal and from what they say, that's what it left me with. It left me with a object of worship that has parts, that moves, that extends and stretches and shrinks, but I don't know how. That's what you said. That's what you said. I don't know how. That's what you left in my mind. I'm not describing his, according to what you say, I'm not describing his hands. I'm not describing his feet. I'm not describing his face. I'm not describing how he moves. I'm not describing how he shrinks. But what you've left the person with is such an ugly belief because you told them it's literal. And that's how you get individuals who read your books, attend your classes, and think Allah is a body, and Allah has a form, and Allah is a man, a form of a man. And they believe that Allah is not a formless God. Allah is the same God in a form like Christians, Jews, and others. وَالْإِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. That's what you left the people with. And even if they don't say it, that's what's in their minds. And when they're pressed, they can't answer. They can't answer. They have no answer whatsoever. Except you're a deviant. Let me go back quickly and answer your questions. Somebody had questions. I'll take 5-10 minutes. I have to get out of here. But don't worry, I'm gonna be here every day. Allah give me breath, and I'm gonna take you slowly and slowly through this. And we're not gonna just stay here, because this is really for me not what I want to do. I'd rather just teach. But what happens is I'd rather just teach you the classical books and go through it. But I gotta unravel some stuff first, because when I teach, sometimes people are so affected by these bad beliefs that basic things in Islam is difficult for them. So I gotta consider everybody, and I just ask the ones who are clear to be patient, go through the process, and help spread. All right, quickly. Hold on 1 second. Oh, never mind. Excuse me 1 second. I'm sorry. All right, let me see what questions I have here. Hold on 1 second. If the question is way over the place, I'm not going to answer. If it ain't related to what we're talking about, I'm not going to answer, because I'm not going to be chasing everybody's ideas all over the place. So please try to keep your questions related to what I'm talking about. Barakallahu bikum. Oh, I'm trying to find the questions. What are there? Can you also speak about the Wahhabis that believe the earth is flat? That's totally insignificant in relating to what we're talking about. That's small compared to these Aqidah issues. And we already know that's not the case, so no need to go into that. With all due respect, my brother. Allah. Yeah, I think y'all already gathered about me that I speak a certain way. So if my tone sometimes seems kind of rough or harsh, just understand it's just my nature, the way I talk. All the time, I don't mean to be harsh or rough. That's just, I grew up in a certain environment. So that environment has a certain practice, and it's going to take years to get your nature out of you to be conscious of the soft thing. I don't come from that. I come from a rough environment. So therefore, the speech sometimes is assertive all the time. And it takes time to work on that. Years, almost a lifetime. So don't take it like you know, I'm nailing you or something. I'm not. When you get to know me, I'm not. You'll see. I'm not like that. One of their scholars I had a dialogue with, as I. Additionally, Imam Ash'ari and his noblest followers affirmed that Allah has two hands, a face, and he said two eyes. If you are Ash'ari, what do you think of this? All right, I'm gonna give two things. If you want to learn about the Ash'ari, read the books and talk to the scholars of the Ash'ariyah, right? If you want to learn about the Salafiyya or Wahhabiyya, you should learn from the books of the Wahhabiyya and the Salafiyya, right? Why am I saying that? No Wahhabi, no Salafi going to tell you what I just said. Not one, right? And I wouldn't accuse them of that. They don't say what I said. They don't say that. The one who says what I said is ignorant. They don't know the madhab of the Wahhabiyya or the Salafiyya. What I said, what you say leaves that conclusion in the mind of the person who understands it as you said, even if they don't utter it. That's what I said. I didn't say you said that. So let's not mix. I don't want you to be confused. Go back and say, Imam Amin said the Salafi say this. I didn't say the Salafi said that. I said what they say, if you take it as they say it, it will leave these concepts. Whether you utter them or you don't, that's what the result would be. Right? That's what I said. Now we could talk about that. Or you can just deny all the stuff, which I would hope you would, and then we're where we're at now. Now you've become truly athari. As they say, athari, now you've become truly athari when you remove all these crazy things that you say about Allah. And that's the intent. So I'm just showing you your ugly belief. And then you deny all that. I said, alhamdulillah. Now we got somewhere. Right? All right, but let me go back to that question quickly because it relates. So this person who was not Ash'ari says, additionally, Imam Ash'ari and his noble followers affirm that Allah has two hands, a face, and said two eyes. If you are Ash'ari, what do you think of this? Now let me stop. Imam Ash'ari and his noblest followers did not speak English. Did everyone hear that? Please put that what I just said up on the screen. Imam Ash'ari and his noblest followers did not speak English. Right? So since that's the case, it is impossible that Imam al-Ash'ari and his followers, his noblest followers, ever said two hands, a face, and two eyes. Never will you find them saying that. Absolutely impossible. They didn't speak English, so they didn't say that. So what did they say? That's what you need to go back. So if you're trying to say that they said that Allah has a yad or Allah has a ayn or a wedge, that's what they may have said. Now, I agree that they did say that because Allah mentioned about al-ayn, al-yad, and al-wajh in the Quran. Yes, yadullahi fawqa aydihim. Right? Allah said yadullah. But he didn't say the hand of Allah. Right? He never said hand. Allah said kullu shay'in halikun illa wajha. Everything will perish except his wajh. He didn't say face, he said wajh. So if you're going to be correct, say Imam al-Ash'ari, they said that Allah, they affirmed that Allah has a wedge, a yad, an ayn. Yes. No one argues that. Every Muslim got to believe that. So what were you trying to say when you said that they said Allah has two hands and a face and two eyes? Are you trying to say that Imam al-Ash'ari and his followers believe what you believe? All you got to do is go to the books of Imam Ash'ari and his noblest followers, and they rejected what you're talking about. No one says that. None of them. Right? So that's a lie. And the one who said it knows it's a lie. But that's why I tell you, when we translate things, you've already taken it out the context. Because when they use those terms, they're only affirming what Allah affirmed in the Quran, and immediately following that, they say, bila kayf or laysa kamithlihi shay, right? That Allah doesn't have a how. Not He has a how and I don't know it. There's no how related to Allah and His attributes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not resemble His creation. Do you understand the difference? Don't be fooled. There's a difference from reciting what Allah said and then translating its meaning to English and saying that's what Allah said. It's not what Allah said. And why is that important? Because it's going to mix you up. Because here you are, Allah said Ain, Wajh, and Yed, right? He used those words, right? And you translated hand, face, eye, right? Now, when you say hand, face, and eye, you got something that comes to your mind to meaning that. You don't even think of the word Yed, you don't even think of the word Ain, and you don't even think of the word Wajh. You don't even know they exist. So they done change the revelation when they do that. And you start thinking of these words from your context. And this is wrong. That's why the early scholars didn't want to translate the Quran. They said only translate the meanings of the Quran. You cannot literally translate Al-Quran. If you literally translate Al-Quran, you're going to go astray. Because the meanings in English don't contain the meanings of Arabic in Arabic language. They're not as vast and broad. And you miss context. When you use the word Yed and you're talking about Allah, there's a whole different meaning as if you use Yed when you're talking about the creation. When you use Ain related to Allah and when you use Ain related to creation, the meanings are totally different. And when you use Wajh related to Allah and you use Wajh related to the creation, the meanings are totally different. That's why Imam al-Tahawi said, وَمَنْ وَصَفَ اللَّهَ بِمَعْنٍ مِنْ مَعَانِ الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Whoever describes Allah with a meaning from among the meanings that apply to human beings has disbelieved. That's why he said it. He ain't talking about the words, he's talking about the meanings. Because the words is language, and language you have to convey. But the meaning that should be understood is not what rushes to your mind, as the scholars of Ahl-Sunnah said. So that is false. Totally false. And that's the other false thing when they try to say the Ash'ari deny the attributes of Allah. No, Ash'aris don't deny the attributes of Allah. The Ash'aris deny those unbefitting meanings that you apply to the attributes of Allah. Don't mix the difference. No Ash'ari is going to say Allah doesn't have the attribute of al-istiwa. No Ash'ari is going to say that Allah doesn't have the attribute of Yed or Wajh or Ain. But when you start saying Allah established, Allah rose above, Allah has a hand, Allah has a face, all the Ash'ari are going to deny that. And then when you say, oh, that's literally, no Ash'ari is going to accept that. Not one. No one's going to accept when you say, oh, these must be literal. No one's going to accept that. None of the Ash'ari. Even the Ash'aris who translate words in their books, if you ask them, do you mean Allah literally has a hand? They're going to say no. And many of the Ash'aris who I wish they didn't do it because we in English are missing something. We come from backgrounds of anthropomorphism. So when they do that, it doesn't help us any. They need to explain, but they don't. They're writing books and selling books. I got that. But if you read a book written by an Ash'ari and they say the hand of Allah, and you ask that Ash'ari, do you mean that Allah literally has a hand? They're going to tell you no, automatically. And then when you ask them, why did you write hand? They're going to go explaining away from what you understood. So let's not play games. This is games. And they're full of games. That's why I say learn your religion, and this stuff will be easily dissected. We don't deny Allah's attributes. We deny those blasphemous meanings you apply to Allah's attributes. Okay, I got to hurry up. I'm sorry, I got 5 minutes. I got to go. And I'll give you the example of this quickly. That's why many of you don't like to translate Allah as God. Many of you don't do it. You just say Allah. You don't say God. Why? Because you believe that when you say God, and God is the meaning of the creator in English. That's the word we use for the creator. But what people understand from the term God sometimes does not befit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why you just say Allah. And I say the same thing with Yed and Ain and Istiwa and Wajh. All of those, we shouldn't translate them. We should explain the meanings. If we translate everything else, when it comes to Allah, we shouldn't literally translate Allah's attributes. That's a problem. And it leads to many other problems, and we should stop. That's my opinion. And that was the opinion of many great scholars. And you can find many books that scholars wrote in Fatawa why they said don't translate the Quran into other languages. Only translate the meanings. Oh, Allah. Books coming soon, Sayyidi. Books coming soon. But I have a big thing. When I start cracking books, most of us are not going to have those books. So, because most of the books are in Arabic. And so I got to help along. That's why I'm doing all this. It's going to be a long process. This stuff's not going to be overnight. If I start cracking books, most of our audience can't read Arabic. Most of them don't understand the Arabic language, don't understand scholars. I got to do a lot of stuff before I can actually make the book mean something to you, right? If most of the people in our listening audience, if I told you Al-Hafidh Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentioned in Fathul Bari, such and such and such, they don't know who Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani is. They don't know his weight in the religion. They don't know what Fathul Bari is. So it's really like speaking French, or even though it's Arabic, they're not going to understand. So I got to build the people up so that they understand what is a proof, what is an evidence, what are scholars, what are reliable books. All of that is important. It takes time. Cannot do it overnight. Allah. All right, I'm almost done. I'm trying to find the other question. Abdul Wali, I can't find it. Okay. I mean, I don't want no one just listen to me and blind follow what I'm saying. That's the worst thing you could do. So I don't do your homework, do your research, and use your brain. And I'm going to give you so much homework and research. Don't worry, you have a lot to do. You ain't going to have shallow arguments. You're gonna be able to have legitimate things, questions to deal with. Because it's simple. I can tell you this, I could cut this whole thing. Don't ascribe anything that relates to creation and meaning to Allah. You finish. Affirm what Allah mentioned in the Quran as Allah mentioned it. Affirm what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the Hadith as he mentioned it. Do not ascribe to Allah any resemblance in any way to any created thing while affirming the truthfulness of what Allah and His Messenger said. Even if you don't know the reality of that, your faith is safe. I can summarize the whole thing. That's the reality. If you do that, you're safe. Don't deny what is related in the Quran as an attribute of Allah, as Allah revealed it. Don't add to it. Don't subtract from it. And while believing that, understand that Allah is not like anything in His creation. You're safe. That's the easy shortcut, right? But what happens? There are people doing other than that. So you got to deal with that issue because that's your reality. Someone is telling the brother that Allah has hands and two eyes and two hands and a face. Allah didn't say that. Nowhere in the Quran. They didn't say, oh, he doesn't speak Arabic. Okay, Allah didn't reveal the Quran in English. Tell him what Allah said and tell him what it means to you. But tell him what Allah said, not what you're talking about. Because Allah didn't say that. So that's the easy way. All right, I'm done. I'm sorry. I'll look and I'll try to answer whatever questions were there that I missed. Uh, I don't see any questions that are real questions. Okay. MashaAllah. Barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, tomorrow. Oh my goodness. This is funny. Alhamdulillah. So my Salafiyya brother, Tayyib, may Allah guide me. And I hope Allah guides me and you. And I just tell you, if you want to say about Allah, say it in Arabic and leave it and don't add nothing to it. And then I would agree with you, that is the way of the Salaf. Once you start adding, and I know you ain't among them, you just follow what they told you. I got that. So in the meanwhile, if you want to be safe, say what Allah said, don't add nothing, don't subtract nothing, and then keep it as that. If you start translating, say this is not what Allah said, this is what I'm understanding from what Allah said. And then we don't have no argument. I already know what Allah said. I don't disagree with Allah said. I may disagree with your understanding, and you may disagree with my understanding, but neither one of us is going to disagree with Allah said. If you leave it there, we're never going to have a problem. But once you start translating, once you start adding words, once you start explaining your understanding, we're going to differ. None of us will differ that Allah said, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arshi istawa, yadallahi fawqa aydihim. No one's going to differ that Allah said that. It has reached us in a mutawatir way. Now, no one disagrees that Allah said, Laysa kamithli shay, wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. No one in the world can disagree with that. Whoever disagrees with that is definitely not a Muslim. Now, where is our disagreement going to come in? When you start telling me this is literal, when you start telling me I must believe literally that Allah has hands and face, that Allah is in heaven and rose above the throne, and Allah moves and Allah descends and ascends, literally, that's where we're going to have a problem. And I'm never going to tell you that. You're going to say that, not me. So understand, let's not get confused so we can start making stuff up. You're funny, Farouk. All right, barakallahu fikum. Don't worry, I'm going to show you some stuff where this stuff ain't going to make no sense. You'll see it, but it takes time. Just be patient. And I'm not dragging you along. I'm just setting principles for you, and each step I'm going to build, because this is something that is going to expose you to a lot of stuff that they don't want you to be exposed to. You're going to know the books of Ahl Sunnah, the scholars of Ahl Sunnah, where they said it, what things, and I'm just going to show you. And then hopefully, since you want to be a student of knowledge, you're going to start learning more, you're going to improve in your studies, and you're going to be able to see it yourself, which I believe we need. The biggest victory of those people is the ignorance of the common people, especially us in our inner city community, about scholarship, about books of Islam, about chains of narrations. Because we don't know that stuff, they can play games with us all day. And we think he went to Saudi Arabia, got a degree, he graduated, he know Arabic better than me, so he got to be right. Because we're intimidated. As soon as someone starts quoting a little bit of Arabic, we get nervous. And trust me, don't be impressed by that. Because there's Jews and Christians who speak, and atheists who speak Arabic like masters. Don't get confused with that. There are people, Christians, Jews, CIA agents, FBI agents, secret services in the military who speak Arabic better than scholars in Arabic language. They speak Arabic. They know Arabic left and right. Their job is to just learn Arabic so they can go take over the Muslim world. So don't be fooled because someone's good in Arabic. That has nothing to do with the religion. That's a language. It doesn't mean you understand the religion. It is a tool to understand the religion, but in and of itself, your skill in Arabic doesn't necessitate that you're going to understand the religion properly. So don't mix the two. So if someone speaks Arabic, stop having an ego. Say, okay, you speak Arabic better than me, fine. But here are the books. Since you speak Arabic so good, here are the texts. Here are the statements of the scholars. You explain it. That's it. That's the easiest way. I'm never intimidated by someone who speaks Arabic better than me. Because you speak Arabic, that doesn't mean you can change the book. Right? That means you good. That means you should be able to read the book. Right? So if you, I know I'm supposed to be going, I'm sorry. If you know Arabic, fine. Here's the book. Explain it to me. Right? Hey, you're the Arabic scholar. You are Sibawayh and Khalil ibn Ahmed and Ibn Malik. Here you go. Read the book. La ilaha illallah. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Tonight, oh, excuse me, is the flyer available? Dang, I talked myself out of the... Tonight, at 9 o'clock, we have the Black Imams round table with Imam Luqman Ahmed, Imam Fahim Lee, Imam Naeem Abdullah, and this poor, wretched servant of Allah, Amin Muhammad. We're all going to have a nice talk tonight about economics and community development, because we having all this, we still got to build our communities. Because while we're talking about these things, and we must talk about them, there is a reality going on the ground that our communities are getting decimated, and we're losing our children to the dunya. So we got to start getting other things together. While we're working on correcting our belief, we still got other work to do. We gotta get this business stuff together. We got to build our communities. We got to develop our communities. It's work. We can't just sit around debating all day. I mean, though we got to take care of these issues, but we got other stuff to do too. We got to build schools. We got a lot of work to do. So tonight, inshallah, join us. Spread it. The flyer is on the Masjid Muhammad page. It's on my personal page. And inshallah, we'll get together tonight and family time and talk about some things to help build something instead of destroying. Barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.